It was the spring of 1995 in a quiet town called Willow Creek. The air was warm, the sky was clear, and the whole community had gathered at the local high school for the annual spring talent show. Among the most anticipated performances that night was a cheerleading routine by the Willow Creek Junior Cheer Squad. The squad was made up of 6 bright, energetic girls between the ages of 10 and 12. They were best friends, known for their big smiles, red uniforms, and perfect routines. Everyone in town loved watching them cheer. Their parents cheered the loudest in the front row, holding up signs and taking pictures. It was supposed to be a night to remember, full of fun and laughter. The girls performed their routine perfectly. The crowd clapped and cheered loudly as they formed a final pyramid and shouted, "Go, Willow Creek!" Confetti fell from the ceiling, and music blasted through the speakers. That would be the last time anyone saw the 6 girls together. After the show, the girls went backstage to collect their things. According to their parents and teachers, they were planning to go get ice cream at the nearby diner. But when the adults came looking for them a few minutes later, the girls were gone. At first, people thought they had walked ahead or gone to the restroom. But when minutes turned into an hour and there was still no sign of the girls, panic began to spread. The police were called immediately. Officers arrived with search dogs and flashlights. They searched every hallway, every corner of the school, and even the surrounding woods. Parents were crying. The community came together to help search. Posters of the girls' faces were put up around town. Their names, Katie, Lily, Hannah, Grace, Zoe, and Emma, were on everyone's lips. The girls were not the type to run away. They were close with their families, got good grades, and were excited about their next performance. No one could understand how 6 young girls could disappear without a trace from a public event filled with hundreds of people. Over the next few days, the FBI got involved. They searched nearby roads, rivers, and abandoned buildings. The town's news stations ran special reports. A reward was offered, but nothing helped. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing. Their backpacks and shoes were found neatly lined up backstage. One red bow was lying on the ground near the door, but no one could say if it meant anything. Over time, theories started to rise. Some believed the girls were taken by someone they knew. Others feared they had wandered into a nearby forest and gotten lost. Some even whispered about strange things happening in the town, stories that older people said had been forgotten for a reason. But none of the theories could explain why no bodies, no clothing, and no real evidence had ever been found. As months turned into years, the case grew cold. The cheerleaders' parents continued to hope. Every year, on the same date, the town held a small candlelight vigil in front of the school. People brought flowers, teddy bears, and pictures of the girls. Many of the parents moved away, unable to live in a town full of painful memories. But some stayed, still searching, still waiting for answers. The girls' disappearance became part of Willow Creek's history, a story parents told their children with sad eyes and quiet voices. And then, exactly 20 years later, something happened that changed everything. It was a quiet summer morning in 2015 when a man named Eric Matthews set out on a solo hiking trip through the Willow Creek woods. Eric wasn't from the town. He lived in a nearby city and often traveled to small towns to hike and take photos for his nature blog. That day, the sky was cloudy and the wind was soft. He had no idea he was about to uncover something that had been hidden for 2 decades. He followed a narrow trail that seemed less used than others. The trail curved deeper into the trees and bushes, far from the more popular paths. After an hour of walking, he noticed something unusual on the ground near a slope. There was a large, flat stone half buried in the dirt. What caught his attention was that the soil around it looked disturbed, like it had been dug up at some point. Eric's curiosity got the better of him. He knelt down and began brushing away the loose dirt with his hands. As he cleared more soil, he realized the stone was covering something. It wasn't just a rock sitting there by chance. It had been placed to hide something underneath. Eric pulled out his small camping shovel and carefully worked around the stone's edge. After about 20 minutes, he managed to lift it slightly and then push it aside. What he saw underneath made him freeze in place. A dark, old suitcase lay beneath the stone. The corners were rusted, and the handle had almost broken off. Dirt and time had taken their toll on it, but the suitcase was still mostly intact. He reached out and slowly opened it. The hinges creaked as the top lifted, and Eric gasped. Inside were several red cheerleading uniforms, faded, torn, and covered in dust. The word cheer was still visible across the front in gold letters. He saw matching bows and small white sneakers, all crumpled and aged. Some of the clothes looked burned or torn. Eric sat back, trying to understand what he was looking at. It was clear that these items had been buried on purpose. Someone had gone to a lot of effort to hide them. He snapped a few pictures and called the local authorities. Within an hour, the area was surrounded by yellow tape and police vehicles. Officers from Willow Creek and nearby towns arrived, along with crime scene experts. Forensics teams carefully removed the suitcase and began searching the area. Word spread quickly through the town. The headline, "Hiker finds missing cheerleaders' uniforms after 20 years," made it to local news channels by that afternoon. Some people cried. Others stood silently, and many drove to the edge of the woods just to be near the place where the suitcase was found. The uniforms were sent to a lab for testing. Police hoped to find DNA, fingerprints, or even blood samples that could help explain what had happened to the girls. The community was filled with questions. Why were the uniforms buried? Why were they damaged? Was it a sign that the girls had been harmed, or could it mean something else? No bones or remains were found nearby, at least not at first. Still, many feared the worst. The discovery brought back old pain, but also reopened the case. The missing cheerleaders were no longer just a sad memory. They were real again. They had left behind clues, and now, for the first time in years, there was hope that someone might finally figure out what had happened to them. Among the people who returned to town after hearing the news was Rachel Simmons, the older sister of one of the girls, Zoe. Rachel had been 16 when her sister disappeared. Now in her 30s, she still remembered that night like it was yesterday. Seeing the suitcase on the news made her heart pound. She felt pulled back to Willow Creek, determined to find answers. She told reporters she wouldn't leave until the truth came out, no matter how hard it was to hear. And soon, something even more disturbing would be uncovered not far from where the suitcase was buried, something that would change everything people thought they knew about the case. The days after the suitcase was found were filled with tension in Willow Creek. Police officers, detectives, and news vans filled the small town. Some people were excited that the case was active again, while others were afraid of what they might learn. Everyone had waited 20 years for answers, and now it felt like the truth was finally within reach. The woods where the suitcase had been found were searched carefully. Metal detectors scanned the soil, dogs sniffed for scents, and drones flew overhead to look for any other signs of digging or unusual ground shapes. Then, just 3 days later, something shocking was discovered about 100 feet from the original site. One of the search dogs stopped and began barking near a group of fallen trees. Officers rushed over and started clearing away leaves and branches. What they found was a second buried object, but this time it wasn't a suitcase. It was a shallow grave marked by large rocks and packed with dry soil. When investigators carefully removed the top layer of dirt, they uncovered pieces of a red cheerleading shoe, a broken hairbrush with names scratched on the handle, Katie, and something far worse, small bones. Experts were brought in to examine the remains. They confirmed they belonged to at least one child, possibly more. The bones were old, but DNA testing could still be done. It would take time, but already the truth was beginning to rise from the dirt. News of the grave caused panic and sadness in town. Parents who had held on to hope for 20 years were now fearing the worst. Candlelight vigils were held again, but this time the mood was different. The community was no longer asking, "Where did they go?" but instead, "Who did this?" Rumors spread quickly. People began pointing fingers at teachers, bus drivers, even family members. Some remembered how a janitor at the school had suddenly left town just weeks after the girls vanished. Others talked about a strange man who used to sit near the cheer practice field, pretending to read a book. But no one had solid proof. Rachel Simmons, Zoe's sister, began going through old yearbooks and town records. She spoke with her sister's old classmates, neighbors, and anyone who might have remembered something strange from that night. Slowly, A name kept coming up: Mr. Dwyer, a volunteer photographer who had offered to take pictures of the event in 1995. He wasn't a teacher, just someone from the community who liked photography. He had taken many of the photos used in the town newsletter and school posters. Back then, people thought he was kind and helpful. But Rachel found something that bothered her. After the girls disappeared, Mr. Dwyer stopped volunteering. Then, a few years later, he moved away without saying goodbye to anyone. Rachel told the police, and they began looking into his past. They found out he was now living in a small cabin 2 towns over, far from Willow Creek. They paid him a visit. At first, Mr. Dwyer acted confused and calm, saying he barely remembered the girls. But when officers asked about the 1995 show, he began to get nervous. They asked if he still had any of the photos from that night. He said no, but the next day, police got a warrant and searched his property. Inside a dusty wooden chest in his attic, they found several rolls of old film, some labeled with dates from 1995. One roll stood out. It was marked Cheer Final Show. The photos showed the girls smiling backstage, holding hands and laughing. But the last few pictures were different. They showed the girls walking through a side door behind the school, led by someone just outside the camera's view. The side door had never been part of the official search. It led into a maintenance area rarely used by anyone. This new clue was huge. Police returned to the school and searched the space behind that door. It was dark, dusty, and filled with old tools. In the corner, they found pieces of red cloth stuck under a wooden shelf. Tests would later show it matched the fabric of the cheerleading uniforms. The pieces were small, but they proved the girls had gone through that door. Now, with this new information and Mr. Dwyer acting more suspicious by the hour, the police believed they were finally getting close to solving the mystery that had haunted Willow Creek for so long. The town of Willow Creek waited as detectives and forensic teams worked quickly to piece everything together. The discovery of the uniforms, the shallow grave, the photos, and the hidden door behind the school had built a case stronger than anyone had ever expected. DNA tests on the bones confirmed what many feared. They belonged to Katie and Emma, 2 of the missing cheerleaders. Their families held each other and wept when they got the news. But this sad confirmation only made the investigators more determined to find out what happened to the other 4 girls. Meanwhile, Mr. Dwyer had been taken in for questioning. He denied knowing anything about the girls' disappearance, saying he was only a photographer and had no reason to harm anyone. But his story didn't match the evidence. Found the photos he took that night. Mr. Dwyer claimed he had left early and didn't know how the pictures of the girls going to the side door got on his film. Police found this hard to believe. They showed him the red cloth found near the same area and told him about the suitcase hidden in the woods. Still, he refused to talk. The pressure grew as more evidence was uncovered. In his backyard shed, buried under boxes of old camera equipment, police found a charm bracelet. It was rusted and dirty, but one of the names engraved on it was Zoe. Rachel Simmons confirmed it had belonged to her sister. That was the final piece that allowed the police to charge Mr. Dwyer with kidnapping and murder. The trial began 6 months later, and the entire town watched every moment on television. People who had known Mr. Dwyer were shocked to learn he had lived among them for so long while hiding such a terrible secret. The court heard from experts, family members, and even some retired police officers who had worked the case in 1995. Rachel gave a powerful statement, saying how her family had waited 2 decades to find out the truth and how losing her sister had changed her life forever. The evidence against Mr. Dwyer was overwhelming. He had been the last person to photograph the girls. He had items connected to them in his home, and he could not explain how or why the uniforms had ended up buried in the woods. In the end, the jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Though the community felt relief, there was still pain. Only 2 of the 6 girls had been found. The families of Lily, Grace, Hannah, and Zoe continued to hope that one day they, too, would have closure. In honor of the girls, the school built a memorial garden near the gym where they had performed that final night. A statue of 6 cheerleaders standing in a circle with their hands joined was placed in the center, with each girl's name engraved on the stone path below. The discovery brought long-awaited answers, but also deep sadness. Some townspeople admitted they felt guilty for not noticing anything strange back then. Others wondered if the tragedy could have been prevented. Over time, Willow Creek slowly began to heal. The case was talked about in schools, and the story became part of local history. Children growing up in the town were taught to always speak up if they saw something that didn't feel right. The legacy of the 6 cheerleaders lived on, not only as a reminder of what was lost, but also as a reason for the town to stay united and careful. Rachel Simmons stayed in Willow Creek, choosing not to run from the pain, but to turn it into something good. She helped start a foundation in her sister's name to support families of missing children. She visited schools, gave talks, and worked closely with investigators on cold cases around the country. Even though the wounds of the past would never fully disappear, Rachel believed that justice, though late, had finally come. And deep in the woods, under the stone where the suitcase had once been buried, wildflowers began to grow again, as if the earth itself was trying to bring peace after years of silence.